We have got a return guest on the show, Brian Hickey. Welcome back to the Needless Things podcast.
Hey, Dave. Great to be back on the show, and great to be chatting to you again about our favorite toys.
Well, that's what's so fun about this is because initially we were talking because of the G.I. Joe Action Force connection, but we're going to talk about a lot more than just that. And I think that's what makes it fun is whether it's Audible Interlude, a G.I. Joe podcast, or Needless Things, like we've got plenty of ground to cover because what we're going to be talking about today is Palitoy.
Yes.
So first of all, before we get into it, let's play a little catch up here for anybody watching. If you're listening to the audio version of this episode, you're going to have fun. You're going to enjoy it. But I recommend if you can watch the video version because we've got some fantastic visual stuff to take a look at. And first thing I want to do is a little check-in with the Battle Action Force treasuries. How have those done? What's the progress on a follow-up? And I mean, I'll tell you this right now. You were generous enough to send me a set for review, which we did. We talked about extensively on Audible Interlude. And I got to tell you, these 3 volumes are one of the prides of my collection at this point. It makes me so happy every single time I'm able to pull one out, even just walking by the bookcase and knowing that I have these wonderful resources that I had never had before. It just makes me happy having these. So I appreciate, one, you doing this work and putting these together, but 2, the fact that I've got them in my collection is amazing. So where are we with that?
David, I really appreciate the great feedback in those volumes. I mean, they were a pure labor of love, and it was one of those projects where it was very lucky for me to be able to, bring sort of Hasbro and Rebellion together. And obviously, and I've got to give a big shout out to Skeletron, who are also another partner on that project too, and they've been brilliant. And Skeletron can handle all of the North American fulfillment, but the books have been really well received. So I mean, this would be a much bigger project than, say, typical books that Total Toy Books would do, where we might print in the hundreds. These were produced in the thousands. Because it's a big project, big stakeholders, and it's a historic property, and obviously much bigger demand for this type of content compared to other books that Total Toy Books has produced. But we've had an amazing first year. They were officially released in January of last year, so around this time a year ago they were officially released, and it's the reaction has been amazing. I mean, I would think, while it is a kind of what I would call like on the larger side of the print run for other projects that we've done, I'm going to be sold out of stock on the European warehouse before the end of this year, if the way things are going, which is really good for Total Toy Books. It's really good for our stakeholder partners as well. And there's a big dent made in our kind of North American stock as well. So it's been amazing to see, say, a market of people who have no nostalgic connection to these comics, get curious about the Red Shadows, about Baron Ironblood, about Action Force, and to dive into those books. So the reviews we've received have been critical reviews from the media, from our readers. It's all really, really positive. And we started off this year, we picked up 3 awards for the books, which was totally, way beyond. I mean, I knew they were good. I knew we had a good product, but to get 3 awards was a real, it floored me. So we picked up an International Design Award for the restoration work on the comic artwork. So that was actually, that was a great industry kind of recognition. And then on the fan side of it, the Comic Scene Awards, which is a fan vote award, we won Best Comic Collection and Best Indie Comic. So it's an indie comic because it's published by an indie publisher, even though strictly speaking, if that was Hasbro or Rebellion releasing that material, it wouldn't fall into that category. But we're really, really chuffed with those awards. The reaction from our readers has been amazing. And, we're on track to do what we set out to do, is to sell all these books, before the end of 2026. So we're in a pretty good place.
That's fantastic, and I'll say for anybody who may not be familiar, first of all, check out our last conversation, which is available wherever you get your podcasts. The magic for me, as an American fan of GI Joe, over the years, kind of seeing like the Robo Skull and the Kraken and these interesting pieces of Action Force that didn't originate in the U.S. and kind of just being like, wow, this is really cool and creative and different, but what is this? What is the story? And to get these volumes that are, here's all of it, here's everything, here's all that really cool stuff that feels familiar but is its own thing, was
Mhm.
so exciting to get. We've had a few pieces of the puzzle over the years, and now to get the full thing laid out. Well, a large part of it laid out, because obviously there's more of the treasury, but just really magical. So for anybody listening or watching, uh, get online, check these out. This Battle Action Force stuff is very, especially if, like me, you're a fan of, you grew up watching PBS, watching British television, whether it's Doctor Who or whatever else. Uh, that flavor is there, and it's so
Yeah,
wonderful.
I love that you actually give that analogy, because I think with today, there's maybe not a huge difference between British and American comics, because so many writers and artists, publishers draw from a global pool of creators from all over the world. But back in the 1970s and 1980s, they were working pretty much with creators that were on their doorstep. So IPC magazines, I mean, they were based in London. So a lot of the artists and writers were London, or kind of British based at least. The exception being that they would go to Spain for a lot of the artists, because artists were much cheaper to hire from Spain at that time. But the quality of the work was amazing. Um, but the British comics definitely have a very distinct kind of flavor compared to the American comics. Whereas, and I would have grown up with American comics too, because Marvel UK published a lot of American content: Star Wars, Spider-Man, X-Men. We got all those American reprints in Ireland, growing up. But but the unique British content is definitely has it visually. It's kind of grittier, it's darker, it's grittier, and
Yes.
then even the storytelling. I mean, they're not overly complex kind of stories, but they're very very fast paced, because it was published weekly. And in a given issue, you might have 6 different stories in one issue, and they might have 3 pages each, or some might have 5 pages, and that's all they had to engage you. And they had to have a cliffhanger ending to get you to come back next week. And it's so that the pacing is very different to the American comics. But they're both excellent styles of comics, but they're just two very different flavors for sure.
Well, and I think when you're young, and you're still, everything is new. When I'm growing up and I read Grant Morrison for the first time, his distinct style and flavor is new and different. Or Alan Davis's artwork, like that sort of rich. There's just a difference, and when you're a kid, you don't know what it is, but it's exotic and it's exciting, and it is almost like Regis or pages of 2000 AD, when I first discovered Judge Dredd and all the stuff in 2000 AD. Like, that was exciting because it was so different. It had such a different style, and as you said, a different grit, a different humor than I had been exposed to. Uh, and reading these treasuries is kind of like experiencing that all over again, because it
Oh,
is
wow.
it is that same pre uh when we really started mixing things. It is still that same feel, and it's exciting. So everybody needs to check out the Battle Action Force treasuries. If you are in the US, you can order them from the Skeletron website, which we've just recently talked about. Brian, I'm sure you saw the most
Yes.
recent image of the 6-inch Skeletron figure.
Oh, yes.
Oh my gosh, so awesome! Those guys are doing such great work over there. I can't wait to see what's next. But you can get them in the U.S. Domestic shipping through Skeletron.com. So check that out. Before we get down to business, because what we're here to talk about today is the My Palitoy Story. And actually, yeah, go ahead and tell us a little bit about that, because I want a foundation for where we're headed.
So to give you some, I'll try and give as quick a background as I can. So Bob Breakin is he was the chief designer at Palitoy. He joined there in I want to say maybe 68, 67, 68. And then he worked right up till 1984. So from the late 60s to the mid 80s, he worked on pretty much every toy brand that Palitoy were producing. And that includes Star Wars, Action Man, Action Force, on the boys' toy side of things. But he also worked on a lot of the girls' brands like Pippa and Tressie, Tiny Tears, things like that. And even on the board games side of things. So he touched nearly every single toy product that was going through Palitoy in that kind of golden era of toy design. And Bob, in recent years, we'll say maybe over the last 15, 20 years, he's been retired, but he's been doing the convention circuit around the UK. Action Man conventions, Star Wars conventions, Pippa conventions. And the more conventions he did, he would always prepare like a presentation, and he started to build up this kind of archive of knowledge about the history of Palitoy beyond even when he started working there. And over the space of about 10 years, he actually put together this history that starts in 1919 and goes right through to the 1990s, when Palitoy was eventually dissolved. And I had a kind of a chance encounter where I got to meet Bob back in 2015. I got to work with him on my kind of first Action Force book, got to interview him for that. We built up a really good rapport. And when it came time for him to try and get his own book published, he went knocking on the doors of all the big publishers in the UK, and they all said no thanks. And then I offered, if he wanted, I would do his book. I would design and publish it, and we try and do it through Kickstarter. So Bob said, okay, look, he took a chance on me. He said, okay, let's give it a shot. And back in 2023, this bad boy was released. My Palitoy Story, it was funded through Kickstarter. We got an amazing reaction from people on Kickstarter with this. And this hardback edition, 256 pages, that was released. And it's subsequently sold out. It's completely out of print. And that brings us to this version that you see here. Because there's still a demand for Bob's book, we're sold out. So we said, okay, why don't we do a second edition? We could do it as a soft cover, and we can bring the price down, because that was €95, the hardback edition. So we want to try and get that down to like, €30, which is, roughly, $30 to $35, maybe 25 British pounds, get it into that kind of price bracket. So we thought, if we go with a paperback, we can re-release that for people who didn't get a chance to get the hardback.
Right.
And then Bob suggested, well, you know what? It's 2026. It's Action Man's 60th anniversary this year. So what if we were to put an extra 32 pages in of just Action Man content? And Bob reached out to some of his colleagues, Nick Farmer, who's a former brand manager for Action Man, Greg Hughes, who's one of the principal Action Man designers at Palitoy. He created Captain Zargon, the Space Rangers, loads of different types of military uniforms. There's the Special Assault teams. Greg is a prolific designer. Jeff Macy, who was an overall kind of like brand manager in Palitoy, John Holmes and Roger Morrison, who worked on the manufacturing side. They're all contributing small articles to go into these 32 pages with images that have never been published before. So it's it's not just a soft cover of the original. It's a true second edition in a soft cover format. So we're really excited to bring this back to Kickstarter in February. At the end of February, it's going to launch, and we're looking forward to hopefully getting this out later this year.
That's awesome. So, Palitoy, my first, and we talked about this a little bit on the last episode, but I think we were trying to stay more Action Force focused. But Palitoy was more than just the military, fantasy military. Back in the day, my first awareness of the company was Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Because when I'm to this day still a massive Doctor Who fan. As a matter of fact, the Roku channel has a Doctor Who channel that just broadcasts classic Doctor Who up through Sylvester McCoy 24/7. So my like comfort TV, if I'm working down here or just doing something, I just put on the Doctor Who channel and just let it go. And I still love it because, again, when I discovered it, and you're young and you're still taking in everything and influences and whatever else, I think when you take in the classic Who at that age, you overlook its shortcomings and just love it for the characters and the actors and the stories. But when you're a kid in the 80s, you want a toy of everything. Everything that you love, you have to have a toy of it. There are no Doctor Who toys back then. And then later on, well, you know what? I say later on, I believe the first time I saw any Doctor Who action figures was probably around 1986, where there was a Who North America tour. There was a big tractor trailer truck that had a museum inside with some of the old costumes. There was a Sea Devil and a Cyberman, and so it was a mobile Doctor Who museum, and they would visit convention centers around the U.S. They had Bessie with them, and I can't remember because we didn't. I'm 10 years old at the time, so the idea of taking pictures of all of this or going to meet a doctor that at that point I hadn't heard of yet, because I want to say, I can't remember if it was Colin Baker. Well, yeah, in 86, who would have been the current doctor in the UK?
Oh dear, I would not. I'm probably the wrong guy to ask about that. Tom Baker was my doctor, and when Tom left,
and he was my favorite. But I think by 86, it might have even been Peter Davison, but a doctor and an assistant were part of the tour and were doing little speaking presentations and stuff. But I didn't, again, 10 years old. I'm not paying attention to any of this. I just know I'm going in the trailer, and they had some of the Palitoy toys. And of course, now I'm bugging my mom, like, how do we get these? And she's like, David, they're across the ocean. We can't, this is not going to happen. So that was my first, and now I have a small collection of Doctor Who toys by Palitoy because they're special. They're hugely special to me. But also Star Wars.
Yes.
Action Man, Action Force. So there are multiple brands that Palitoy handled. And that when I look at it, because you have a Star Wars book in your repertoire, is that correct?
I do indeed. Only just released, and I know we might get a chance to talk about it later, but this is just released, and this is purely the history of Palitoy's connection to Star Wars. That the Palitoy saga is how we describe it. But it's not unlike, whereas my Palitoy Story covers everything, this only covers Star Wars, and it's got loads of photos, Bob's personal photos and personal photos from some of his colleagues at Palitoy. So that's again another kind of real labor of love for me. But Palitoy were a great company for kind of licensing. They had a lot of great licensed brands. Doctor Who was one of them. Obviously Star Wars, which they did through their sister company Kenner. They had licenses for Planet of the Apes, Star Trek, the DC superheroes. their licensing model was a huge part of it. But on brands like, say, Action Man, which they licensed the molds from GI Joe, they, in the first year they just released what Hasbro released from '64.
Right.
But they very quickly, and they were like this with a lot of the brands that they licensed, they would innovate. So G.I. Joe, they rebranded it as Action Man, and after the first year, they started to introduce their own accessories, their own outfits, and to make it, more uniquely Palitoy. So that's some great stuff here.
So some of the images I've chosen may not exactly line up with what we're talking about, but I think we've got an example here. Well, I love this image because it's got the 12-inch figure and the 4-inch figure comparison. I think that's such a nice composition there.
But the SAS, outfit, and the on the left there, the ground assault outfit, they're both, Palitoy designs. I'm not sure the US Paratrooper. I'm not sure if that was a Palitoy design or if that's something they brought over from Hasbro. But you had this great kind of, between the two companies. Palitoy would take some Hasbro material, Hasbro would take some Palitoy material. So the flocked hair, the gripping hands. They're all Palitoy innovations. A lot of their uniforms went back over to Hasbro as well. The husky dogs that they developed for the Arctic Explorer set, Hasbro carried those in their line too. So there's that great trade-off between the two companies, both feeding into this the brand of the '70s, really, until Star Wars kind of knocked it all off its perch.
Well, and that's what's so funny about really both Hasbro and Palitoy is the changes that both companies went through. Because obviously Kenner had Star Wars back in the '70s when it started. Hasbro had nothing to do with it at the time, even though now Kenner is a Hasbro brand. And just seeing that progression of how Palitoy, we really didn't have anything comparable to Palitoy in the US. We had lots of different companies would get their hands on this branding. And I think I guess the legacy and the cultural impact of the Palitoy brand, like as much as Americans love Hasbro or Mattel or Kenner or whatever, Palitoy really does seem like something where you'd see that name and have that just sort of excitement, like, "Ooh, this is a Palitoy thing." And if they're doing it, then it's cool.
It's definitely, I think today as collectors, there's a real interest in some of the material, the uniqueness of the toys that Palitoy put out, and it's great to see that legacy has kind of lasted. If things history had played out a bit differently, Palitoy could still be trading today and contributing, great designs. Who knows? But they were a victim of kind of overall changes in the toy industry that kind of started with Star Wars and Bernie Loomis, in the General Mills toy group. And once everything was centralized in America, I think in New York, then Palitoy's days really at that stage were numbered.
Yeah. And looking at the image we've got up right now, well, for the listeners, to me, what we're looking at is a couple of designs I recognize from G.I. Joe and several really fantastic original designs that did not come from Hasbro. Tell us a little bit about what we're looking at on the screen here, because this is very exciting to me. The colors, the designs, everything about it.
This is probably my favorite toy line ever, which was Action Force. And when Palitoy could see that there was this huge new market for 4-inch scale figures, they said, okay, well, what can we do to kind of, to create something to get into this market? Even though they had Star Wars and it was doing great for them, they thought, well, there's an opportunity to do something else here. So they initially conceived, the idea to scale their Action Man best-selling uniforms down to 4-inch scale, and put that out to market. they were a huge success. These kind of generic military figures, they were a massive success in 1982. So and for viewers who aren't maybe aware, in 1982, Britain had been involved in the Falklands War just in the spring of 1982, and these toys came out. Not this particular version on screen here, but the what we call Action Force Series 1, which was more generic military figures. So it had British paratroopers, British Marines, SAS. And when they came out in the late summer of 82, they were an instant sensation. And these are some of the designs that would have inspired, the early kind of, Action Force designs. But they moved away from that kind of futuristic look to a more, contemporary military look at the time. Mm-hmm. But just as the toys were being released, or just before they were released, there was a change in management at Palitoy. And a guy called Andy Lowe took over the brand, and he'd been to the New York Toy Fair where he'd seen Hasbro's G.I. Joe product, and the real American hero scale products. And what he really liked about that was that Hasbro had this whole integrated marketing positioning for the brand. They were going to have, a story to where the characters could have adventures and a universe that they could exist in. Whereas Palitoy's Action Force was just generic military men, and you had to make up your own adventure when you were playing with them. But Andy Lowe was really inspired by what Hasbro were planning to do with G.I. Joe Real American Hero, and he brought that marketing concept back to Palitoy. And then not like they just released Series 1, it was a huge hit, but they were already working on how can we create our own story? How can we kind of model what Hasbro were doing with create a universe? Let's do a comic tie-in, and we need an antagonist. We need heroes. What can we do? And that version of Palette or of Action Force that you had up on the screen a moment ago, where you see all the different teams and the different colorways, that is essentially where they landed. So the red team up in the top left corner there, that's Baron Ironblood and his Red Shadows. They're the bad guys. And then you had these other teams for space, which is Space Force, for a waterborne unit called Q Force. Z Force was the artillery, or infantry, I should say, and then SAS Force with the special ops. And because they were under pressure to get this reimagined toy line out, they had to move really, really fast. So in order to get new vehicles, they had to retool the existing vehicles that they produced, and they reached out to Hasbro to see could they get the molds for their 1982 G.I. Joe vehicles, to flesh out the line. And of course, the Action Force figures don't fit in the G.I. Joe vehicles, so they had to bring some figures over as drivers as well. And that's why we ended up getting characters like Red Laser, who is a kind of a recolored version of the Cobra Commander 82 figure, or Red Jackal. They used the molds for Destro to create Red Jackal.
So I think the key, as you were talking, and this is probably commonly known, but it's an interesting point to make, is military was, for a period of time, military, very, very cool, inspires the imagination, inherent conflict, play patterns available. But what Hasbro saw and what Palitoy saw were, but if we can create original concepts and characters that we own, because right now, anybody can make an army man. And if somebody makes a cooler army man than ours, the kids are going to buy that army man. But if we can get kids attached to the characters that we create and the unique vehicles that we make, then that's ours, and nobody can compete with that.
So that is exactly the thinking that was going on. And to be fair to Hasbro, they really kind of nailed us. There's a great interview with Kirk Bazigian, which I've referenced in my Total Action Force books and in the forthcoming Total Action Force Volume 3, where he talks about working with Bob Prupis to try and reinvent G.I. Joe, and ultimately working with Griffin Bacall to come up with that kind of market positioning. And it really was a stroke of genius. where they landed with it. And Palitoy, when Andy Lowe saw what they were doing, he was like, okay, this is a no-brainer. We've got our own toys, but we need this kind of market position. We've got to align with that to really have some longevity for this brand. And to give Andy Lowe his credit, Action Force became, like, in that first year, it outsold Star Wars. That's how big it was. And even though Star Wars, like in '83 and '84, would be, probably the biggest brand that Palitoy had, Action Force had more longevity, because by '85 Star Wars was going down, but Action Force was going up. And the ambition for the Action Force brand that Palitoy had going into '85 was incredible. And I talk a little bit about that in the book Total Action Force Volume 3, which is coming out a bit later this year. They were going to create the Red Shadows were getting redesigned. Mouton was going to get redesigned. They were going to build a Red Shadows base that was similar in scale to the G.I. Joe Command Center or G.I. Joe headquarters, which Palitoy had re-released the year previous as the Z Force Command Center.
That's on my that and the Z Force APC, which are on my bucket list of, if I have the opportunity at some point, I want those on my shelf because they're beautiful. I think we've got, let me zip through the images because I know we've got one. Okay, there's the APC with that green canopy, just absolutely gorgeous. I don't think I've got one of the Command Center though, but that thing is just beautiful. And actually at Joe Lanta last year, somebody bought one and they're walking by holding their Command Center. It's like, oh,
brilliant.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things that I love so much about everything that I see from Action Force is the vibrant colors. Like, obviously I grew up with Joe. I love G.I. Joe. Great stuff. But, you talking about the different groups that are involved, Q Force, Z Force, they have their distinctive looks. And I guess seeing on some of these vehicles, what's to me a fresh coat of paint on something I'm familiar with, and then on other vehicles, just completely different original thing entirely. It's all so exciting. Like I said, with reading the Battle Action Force Treasuries, it's all like exciting and new and yet familiar.
When I was going to do my research for Total Action Force Volume 3, which is really, it's a design story. It's looking at the design thinking behind developing Action Force. And I've tried to include all these old design drawings, photographs of different colorway mock-ups of the different teams, and then obviously photos of the finished production samples. But what you can see is this kind of struggle between design and marketing, where the design team are definitely going for something that's a lot more colorful, maybe a lot more science fantasy, and the marketing team are kind of pushing back and saying, well, we want something that's a little bit more modern military, special ops, special forces, that type of thing. And what you ended up then is with this kind of hybrid, where you do have some figures in the line that have that kind of classic green camo military look, but others that are just crazy colors like Q Force and like Space Force. And then to come up with the enemy team with that, I mean, the Red Shadow is probably one of the most striking action figure designs ever, in my opinion. But that kind of red, kind of German stormtrooper with the retooled head, it's a very sinister, very sinister, I think, is the best word to describe it. Bad guy or antagonist. And I don't think they intended for it to be as iconic as it would become. They were just like, we want to have fun with the colors, and we want it to be a bit kind of fantastical. But they landed in a really sweet spot with it.
So let's go through some of the, because you sent me a wonderful, just well, I'll say treasury of images that potentially we could go through today. But I knew we just wouldn't be able to get through everything. But let's go through a few things and just discuss their relation to the various projects. So we looked at the image that is all of the Action Force groups, but then we've got this, which
Oh
I had not seen before. This is some kind of like it looks like a space lander.
This is a space kind of, but they call it in the design notes. They call it a space force troop transporter. Um,
Okay.
that's the term that Palitoy used to describe it. And you can see from this model here, this got very far into the kind of design stage. Like, it was very developed in terms of design. And when a model gets produced at that level of detail, it's like one step away from going into production. But they pulled the plug on it. So this design you see here was produced in 1983. The idea was that it would be released in 1984, and there is I do have a production Gantt chart that shows the timelines for all the original Palitoy vehicles, which includes the Roboskull, the Sea Lion, the Triad Fighter, and the Troop Transporter, all lined up for production, and that would have been due for an early to mid 1984 delivery. But they pulled the plug on it at the last minute. Maybe they felt the thinking could have been, let's hold it back for a future wave. Or it could have just simply been, we've got enough between these new Palitoy vehicles plus the additional Hasbro molds that we're bringing over. So in 1984, not only did we get the Roboskull, the Triad, and the Sea Lion, but we also got the APC, the Hyena, which is the red version of the HISS tank. Things like the Z Force Command Center, which we spoke about. And then some smaller Hasbro vehicles, like the Snake armor became the Red Shadows Escape armor. The Fang got released as the Hawk. So these all helped flesh out the 1984 line. So it might have just been felt that maybe this was just one vehicle too many. And while we don't know exactly why it wasn't released, if I speculate, I would say they were probably thinking, we'll save this for a future release down the line, because they were thinking really big, that they had plans for Action Force to go way beyond where it went. But unfortunately, it never transpired.
That would be my guess as well, just from hearing that. I mean, it sounds like 84 was a pretty loaded year, and I could easily see them thinking, you know what, we'll hold this. We have enough. We don't need to put the money into production of this, which is this is a beautiful piece, but clearly lots of tooling, lots would have
Yeah.
gone into actually producing it. So I could definitely say, like, you know what, we're good for this year. Let's see what happens. But I mean, this is gorgeous, and this is the kind of image that would be in Total Action Force Volume 3. Is that right?
That is correct. And this image came from this came from the Chadwick archives. So Neville Chadwick was a photographer. He photographed a lot of material for Palitoy. He had his own practice, and Palitoy was only one of a whole roster of clients that he had in Leicester. They wouldn't even Palitoy wouldn't even have been his biggest client. Like, Neville Chadwick Photography would have been a top dog photographer in Leicester at the time. But I was lucky enough to get into conversation with his son last year, and his son is like, he'd be our generation now. And he said, look, we've got all these images, but we're selling the archive to a third party. So I was able to liaise with the third party and who purchased the archive, and with a bit of back and forth, they were able to share with me some images that they had, and this came up. And
Wow.
Nobody's ever seen the complete vehicle before. We've seen partial shots of it, but no one's ever seen the full vehicle. So this is, I mean, it's great to be able to have this, reproduced at high resolution in the book that's coming out later this year.
I mean, this would have been in whichever team it was for. This would have been used in every mission I went on when I was a kid. The design of it, it's just fantastic with the gunner seats at either end, because it looks like you have two pods facing one way, one pod facing the other way behind that cockpit. Uh, it just looks like such a fun play vehicle.
And part of me wonders, with those pods, like would they detach like kind of drop pods? Because there is a design drawing for which looks very similar to the pods on that ship, where they're 3 interconnecting pods that are like 3 separate mini rigs with different
Right,
playfields.
right.
So it is a different vehicle for sure, but in the drawing that's also in the book, but the visual similarities to this spaceship are very similar. So it could have maybe been a previous idea that was developed into the spaceship, or it was something that they were running maybe parallel. That could maybe have kind of modular elements that could interact with the spaceship. Again, it's hard to say exactly, because even though I've interviewed a lot of the design team for this book, a couple of key designers are no longer with us, particularly Brian Turner, who would have worked on a lot of Action Force material. He passed away last year, or sorry, late 24. He passed away, and even those who are still with us, it's difficult to remember stuff that they were working on,
Sure,
40
sure.
years ago. It's because they worked on so much.
Yeah.
And for them, it's like it was just a job. They didn't realize they were creating a legacy that people would still be interested in, 40 odd years down the line.
Well, and also I'm sure there were pieces that, had more or less investment from them or more or less involvement from them. Yeah, it's in having talked to, some folks that had to do with creating various toy lines. It is a level of, where does the line between work for hire and passion, kind of fall? And it depends, a lot of the stuff, like as a, for instance, Ron Rudat, who, we know from GI Joe, but also worked on WWF for
Mm.
Hasbro, but that was kind of just a job. He wasn't as invested in that as he was in Joe. So you get very different interviews with Mr. Rudat on those topics. And it's
Yeah.
just how it is. But this is beautiful. And just because we're sitting here having fun, imagine if, so you've got the front cockpit and you've got the rear, which is probably engines or thrusters or whatever. But imagine if what's between them, there's like a telescoping mount, and you could add more of those compartments.
Oh,
Like
yes.
maybe like this, let's say this might have been the basic offering, but then
Mm.
you could buy separate little, like there could be a cargo pod, there could be one that's just a weapons mount. So potentially, like maybe this could have extended to twice its length, and you could slot 3 more pods in there, but that had different functions. How cool would
Oh,
that
yeah. I think that's exactly the kind of mentality that the Palitoy designers had. I mean, they really wanted to get as much play into their designs as they could. And
be? Yeah.
I think that's probably why they're still so, the guys like Bob are still so active today, because I think he's a kid at heart, and he never lost that kind of love of play. But what you're describing there, that kind of, you could totally see that sort of modularity working on a vehicle like this.
Well, and what's exciting, looking at this sort of thing now, is knowing how many smaller independent toy companies are out there, and that however slim the possibility may be, that at some point somebody could pick up this design and make it happen. Like, we could someday see this released. Like, it's a possibility, because there's so much creativity and so much drive out there right now from these smaller companies. I think anything is possible.
Oh, look, 100%. And if this or something like this ever came on the market, I'd be straight in there to get that into my collection.
In a second, it's wonderful. All right, let's see. What have we got next? So we already took a brief look at this one, and it's one of those fantastic landscape images. And we talked about the APC, which that red and green color combination just is so appealing to me. There's something about it that's so striking and so uh unique to Z Force, really. Like,
The APC is probably, so that as a kid, it was my favorite vehicle in my collection. I didn't have a Robo Skull when I was a kid. I had to wait till I was a grown up to get my hands on a Robo Skull. But the Z Force APC, it's always been a big, it's a vehicle that I've loved. And even in the comics, the APC is, it gets a lot of comic time, and in different kind of, different kinds of terrain, different kind of climates. It's and that was something that fascinated me as a kid, something that could also, travel on the water as well as on land. And you see that in the story Jungle Terror. The APC gets a lot of, page time in there. But again, the green and black camo with those kind of red highlights on it are, it's just the aesthetic on that is incredible. And then, of course, when you pop open the canopy, you've got those additional kind of play features, like the medic station in there. They did plan to include a gunner station in the APC when the canopy is off, but they didn't go ahead with that. And there will be photos of that in the new book as well, where you can see the gunner station. And it's actually the gun off the Vamp would plug in at the back of the APC, and you could fire that out the back.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love that. And this just feels like an evolution of the APC that I grew up with. And that's what I love about so much of this stuff. So Q-Force is probably the one biggest interest I have, the one where I see these vehicles, and because there's just nothing, American Joe has obviously aquatic forces, but this Q-Force stuff, there's just something special about it to me. And this vehicle in the bottom left here, tell me about this thing. This is gorgeous.
So that's the C line, and that was released the same year as the Robo Skull. So it would have been designed in 83, released in 84. And this was actually a combination of work from Brian Turner, who was developing like a kit bash for a type of submarine vehicle. And separately, there was a third-party company that Palitoy would hire to help generate concepts and ideas, and they were sketching out a whole range of different subaquatic vehicles. And at some point, someone noticed the mock-up that Brian was doing, and the drawing that had been done by Pape and Woodward was this company. The drawing that had been done by them, there was kind of similarities between these two concepts, and maybe these could be fused into a single idea. And so Brian, working with Sean Woodward on the Raffo and Pape and Woodward side of the equation, they collaborated very closely together to create the C line. And originally, the two pods on the side were just engines, but Brian Turner came up with the idea to make them detachable, so that you could have like as outriders rather than engines. And we got this amazing kind of little submarine vehicle with loads of great play features in it. And the reason why it maybe looks so unusual compared to a lot of the other vehicles in the Action Force line is that it's like that tug of war that I talked about previously between design and marketing, where design wanted to get something a bit more science fantasy into the mix. And I think with teams like Q-Force and Space Force, they could really do that. And of course, the byproduct of that is the C line. And I mean, again, I didn't have a C line as a kid, but today I would rank that at the same level as the Robo Skull for me. I think they're two very different, but two very unique and excellent vehicles.
Yeah, just looking at it, it has that, like you said, very different design, but the same eye to engineering of making something that's visually very interesting and unique, but also has a lot of functionality to it, a lot of play to it.
Well, one of the and you see this in all the Palitoy specific vehicles that were produced. There's a lot of detachable accessories, and they can all interchange. So you can swap them around on its own vehicle, but then also interchange them with other vehicles. And it's a great little play feature. So you could essentially customize to a degree, your Palitoy vehicles.
Well, and it's also brilliant just because it encourages the customer to buy more stuff. Because if it all works together in that way, that
Yeah.
has that modularity, then well, now I need, just like we were talking about with that troop carrier. You buy the core piece, then you've got all these pods though that we want to go with it. Like it's smart. And speaking of fun, unique designs, I believe up in the top right there, now to my eye, that's Superpowers. What was it? Darkseid's ship originally.
In the top right, that is the Triad fighter. And that's a Bob Breakin design. Bob designed that around the
Okay,
same time as
okay.
the Roboskull. And again, that's got the two vehicles at the front can actually detach as separate, smaller pods that could detach. And the wings then on the main ship could invert, as in like they're pointing the opposite direction. Um, so it's to give it a more streamlined look. So that has again, you can connect other Space Force pieces, could connect to that. So the Space Force engineer has these kind of like cables for when he's doing repair work. He could plug into ports on the Triad fighter himself when he's doing like repairs to that. And it does have one GI Joe piece in the cockpit. It uses um, the the control panel off the HAL. Is used as the control panel. It's
Oh,
been
wow.
retooled and it's used inside in the cockpit.
So what I was thinking of, because I haven't seen one or thought about it in years, was the Darkseid Destroyer from Kenner's Superpowers line, which is also a middle cockpit with two branching off things. But this is completely different from that. Like, it is visually evocative of that, but a different vehicle entirely. But how wild, because that is also 1984.
Oh wow. Okay, so I'm not even aware of that Kenner vehicle you're describing, because I'm
Well,
immediately
I'm
going to
trying
need
to
to.
bring up a picture of it, and it's not loading for me. I'm gonna see if I can find a different one.
Well,
So yeah, that's very interesting though that they're the same year.
while
Let's
you're
see.
pulling that picture up, I mean, I can talk, really briefly about this particular image in more generally about it. And
Oh
this
yeah,
is
yeah.
this is the Action Force line as it was released in 1984. And what you can see, all the like a lot of the new vehicles are here. So the Hiss tank came across as the Hyena tank for the Red Shadows, and that's where we got the character Red Jackal. He was the gunner or the driver for the Hyena tank. So Palitoy used the molds from Destro to create that character, and he looks very very visually very similar to Destro, but he's just got that Red Shadows logo on his chest. Um, and you can see the Fang helicopter kind of then bottom center, and that was called a Hawk helicopter when they released it as part of the SAS team.
And I
Um,
love those colors on it, that black and yellow. Again, it's they're so simple because you Red Shadows, you have the black and red, Zed Force, the green and red. Like the combinations are simple but so striking, and that black and yellow on the SAS just it immediately grabs the eye.
it's they really did get their color palettes. They nailed them for these teams. But again, in the old design photos that I've seen, um, you see they paint up, like they didn't just land on that color scheme like the first time round. They painted it up in different colorways. They tried it for the Z Force team, for the Q Force team, before they finally landed on this final piece. Um, and the pilots that they brought over, they actually took tripwire, repainted tripwire in the SAS Force colors, and he's known as Blades in Action Force. So Blades he's our helicopter pilot, and you can even notice that the Wolverine there beside it. We've got Hunter is the character in Action Force, and Hunter is based on the molds for the Cobra officer. Oh
I
wow!
didn't realize that. I didn't realize that would pop right in there. Unfortunately, there aren't a ton of great pictures of the Darkseid Destroyer,
Wow.
but you can see there is a similarity there. But what an interesting sort of like just zeitgeist thing that these designs both came out in 1984.
Yeah, that's crazy. Um, I mean, who knows? It could have been that. Uh, there could have been some shared ideas. I mean, Kenner and Palitoy were both part of the General Mills toy group. They were sister companies, um, and there certainly would have been a lot of uh, cross collaboration or pollination with
Right.
Star Wars, the Star Wars brand at that time. Um, but I do have Bob's kind of sketches, his thumbnail sketches, where he's sketching out ideas for another spacecraft, and you see the evolution of this kind of triad fighter start to evolve with these different kind of play features, and they're really rough, loose sketches.
Well, and
So
the Star Force fighter or Star Force pilot is much more concerned about his co-pilots than Darkseid is, because they actually have cockpits, whereas Darkseid's guys are just out in the open.
yeah, so yeah, so it's yeah, so the 84 lineup was pretty impressive. But the sad thing is for Palitoy, in terms of original ideas, this is where it peaked. They did have lots more planned for original toys going into 85, but with the change in direction in Kenner Parker, where everything was going to design would be centralized in New York.
Yeah.
That meant that all the design departments in all the toy group, all the toy companies in the group around the globe, all those design departments were made redundant, and those companies like Palitoy just became distribution and marketing. So what Andy Lowe and his marketing team had to do, they couldn't move forward with any of the new ideas for 85, which were really ambitious. So all he could do to kind of keep Action Force going was go back to Hasbro and say, look, what else have you got for us? And so in 1985, we essentially got Action Force became G.I. Joe at that stage.
Right.
It was they still kept Action Force as the name of the team, but all of the toys were essentially G.I. Joe products, and even to the point where they were shipping in the boxed Hasbro vehicles, taking out the packaging, taking out the instructions, putting in Palitoy branded instructions, Palitoy brand, stickers, Action Force stickers, and repacking it in a Palitoy box and sending it out.
Oh my gosh, that's wild. I had no idea. Wow.
So that's what happened for 85, 86. Because the design team was gone, there was nobody there to deliver on the designs that they had.
That's a shame.
So they had to lean into that deal with Hasbro to take more Hasbro products to keep the brand going. And then, of course, at the end of 86, they just assigned the Action Force trademark over to Hasbro UK. They assigned it over to them, and presumably they did that to offset any kind of royalties that they owed Hasbro at the time, because you can imagine they must have owed significant royalties. And then in 87, Hasbro released G.I. Joe, in Britain and across Europe as Action Force. They now had the trademark, so they released it as Action Force, but it was essentially exactly what you were getting in America, just
right.
with this. It even looked the same, like branding wise, but just G.I. Joe was replaced with Action Force at the top of the card.
Oh, well, I gotta just imagine the possibilities of if somebody were to come along and pick up those concepts and run with them. It would be amazing.
Yeah. It's well, you'll get to see all of those concepts the ones that drawings exist of and photos exist of in Total Action Force Volume 3, which is going to be coming out a little bit later. And this was funded on Kickstarter late last year, and the design is almost complete. There's still a bit of work to do on the design, and I am waiting on a bit of feedback from Bob and some of his Palitoy colleagues on the draft of where it's at to date, because I really want them to, I just want to make sure that I've faithfully captured their thoughts and their memories of this experience. But I'm very excited to share this with everybody when it's out there. And if anyone didn't get a chance to back the Kickstarter, if you just do a search on Kickstarter for Total Action Force Volume 3, you'll find the Kickstarter page. You can late pledge, which is effectively the same as pre-ordering. And when this book comes out, I would say we're looking at late spring, early summer, by the time we get it out, and it'll be, straight into your hands. And I can't wait to share all these great hidden secrets of Palitoy and Action Force with everyone.
I absolutely love sitting down with a great toy design book, because we've been blessed to have, from Masters of the Universe to GI Joe to Star Wars, so many different volumes that have detailed the design process behind these toys that we love. And then to be able to get a look at these concepts, because that's usually like a piece of those books, is here are some concepts that didn't get used. But for Action Force, it feels like there's this whole other story of this is what was next and it didn't happen. And I'm very excited to see all that. Just the
Yeah.
little tease we got from that troop carrier craft. I'm excited to see what's in here. And it's exciting that Kickstarter has expanded to the point now where it's not just, well, you back it or you don't get it. Now they have the possibility of doing a pre-order like that, or using backer kit, or whatever the case is, to where people who come in late still have the opportunity to get these products.
It actually is a great feature that they've really upped their game, say, over the last 18 months. And the pledge manager, which is effectively like a backer kit type solution, you can manage all that within Kickstarter now. And the late pledge features is, like you say, it's great, because every Kickstarter campaign that I've ever done, there's always people who message after the campaign, say, "Oh, I'm really sorry I missed this. How did we get the book?"
Yeah.
So now it's much easier, with the late pledge facility, where people can still go to Kickstarter, they can still pledge, and they'll get their rewards with all the other backers, when the rewards come out.
Yeah, it's they Kickstarter over the years really seems to have paid attention to what their creators and what their customers want and need. And that's impressive, because not all companies do that. So before we wrap things up, we've got a few other images that I pulled from what you sent me. Let's just talk about, you mentioned the 3 awards, which I believe, let's see. Oh no, wait, this is okay. Tell us about this one, because this is interesting to me, because you've got a different line involved on this.
So this actually is an image that's associated with Action Man, and with the reprint, or the second edition, of Bob's My Palitoy Story. And what we have here is, back in 1966, Action Man won Boys Toy of the Year, and another Palitoy product, Tiny Tears, won Girls Toy of the Year. And then Action Man also won the overall Toy of the Year category as well. And that's what these 3 awards are from 19. I think it's at the end of 1966, or that the awards would have been presented at the Toy Fair in January '67. That's where this photograph came from. So this is an internal Palitoy promotional photo that was produced at the time, and well, that this ties in with the Action Man 60th anniversary as well. So as part of our expanded content for Action Man, this is a key part of that kind of early story in that history. So for anyone who is a fan of the 12-inch GI Joe, and maybe is interested to know a little bit more about that kind of shared heritage between Hasbro and Palitoy, and how both companies created, essentially in the 70s, was probably one of the greatest toys of its time. This second edition of My Palitoy Story is going to be a must-have, in my opinion, because it's going to have Action Man content that is never been out there before. So insights from people who worked on it, who made the brand as big as it was, and lots of new images as well. So that's going to be great.
Well, and things like this are exciting too, because as great as it is to see the design process and to talk to the people who were involved in creating the brand, it's great to see things like this that give it a historical context. So it's not just here are some pictures of toys. It's also, and look, here's the cultural impact that those toys were having at the time.
Do you know what? And that I love that you're bringing that up, because I think when I look at Bob's book in particular, Bob captures not just the histories of the toys themselves, but he looks in my Palitoy story. He's looking at how the toy industry changes. He looks at how play changes, and that period in the 1980s was a period where, even though it was a small time in the overall timeline of the company Palitoy, it was the time period where the most changes took place, both in terms of socially how kids played, with the advent of kind of handheld computer games and consoles, the impact they were having on say the dolls and action figures. And of course, the industry changes that we talked about earlier. All of that stuff is captured in Bob's book. It's not a toy guide. It's very much it's a story of a company that played an important role in British toy making history, and its impact, on toy design and on play.
So let's see here. We've got a couple more. Gentlemen hard at work.
I love that picture. What's great about this is that these are Action Man drawings on the desk that were never produced. There's photos of these products where like prototypes were developed, and we have photos of them, but they never went into production. But what you can see over Bob's right hand shoulder there, or to the right of Bob, I should say, you can actually see concept drawings for Action Force that were never produced. And just to the left of Bob, you see a production Gantt chart, which I think is for Action Force product as well. And we have
that's. I love that you can see this this Jeep that's a little different from anything else we saw, like right in the foreground there.
That Jeep is, so I mentioned earlier about Raffo and Pape and Woodward. These were like third-party designers who worked with Palitoy from time to time, and this is one of their designs. And they did produce prototypes, which they photographed, professional photographs of them with different Action Man characters with those Jeeps, and they look simply amazing.
Okay. Minute. Is there a picture? Is one of those pictures included here? Because I think I might have put it in.
I think I did give you one of those. I'm pretty sure I did.
Hang on. Let's see. Nope, not that.
Yeah, here that's the tank, and here we go. That's the Jeep right there.
Okay, this blew my mind because that engine is incredible, but really just the overall presentation of this thing is so cool.
Yeah. When I saw this for the first time back in 2023, I was like, what is this, and why didn't we get it?
yeah
it's and in terms of promotional photography as well, you get a level of posing with the figures that wasn't normally done in toy catalogs. They'd be kind of clumsily kind of posed, whereas this photographer he tried to get the poses more lifelike, because and why not? Because it's a highly articulated figure. It's a great figure to pose. So this is one of those superb pieces. This physical prototype is now in the Victoria and Albert Museum. Is in the archives. I haven't been to see it myself, but I have spoken to other writers and authors who have had the chance to visit, and they have seen this. So it still exists. It's still in storage in an archive. But I would love to see something like this come out. I mean, you think of what Hasbro did with the G.I. Joe classified Vamp, which is an amazing looking vehicle. Imagine that scaled up again for 12-inch, which is what we're looking at here. This is impressive.
Well, and I would imagine a lot of times the promotional shots are that when the marketing people look at something like this, they're going to look at it and say, okay, we need to be able to see the Jeep and all the features, and we want to be able to see the figures and all the features. Like, they're not concerned about making the things interact as much as they are about displaying the product. So here, the guy that's tending to the engine, the figure isn't displayed quite as visibly. So maybe they wouldn't have done that for a pure marketing shoot. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's I
So
would
this
say
is a
this
beautiful
was done
image.
for internal presentation purposes. This is, Paper and Woodward, pitching to Palitoy saying, "Here's our idea. It's going to be amazing. You need to go with this."
Right, right. Let's see.
This is from the
Another
same
really
suite of designs,
unique, interesting piece, sort of a swamp boat type of thing.
and you can see a logo on the side of the boat there, which looks like a wolf's head.
Mhm.
So this team would have been called the Wolf Pack. So the Jeep, just the boat, and the tank was all part of a concept called Wolf Pack. So they were they have a slightly more, they look more like mercenaries necessarily, and not necessarily part of an actual, you know, uh, United Nations,
Right, right.
affiliated special ops team.
Yeah, this is, and again, going back to my fondness for aquatic vehicles, this one definitely hits on a lot of levels for me. And then I think this is the last thing I've got, which my first impression of this was, is this a sniper tank? Because that it looks like that's a cannon, but
Yeah,
it's
it's
so long and slender, it's almost like it's a sniper tank. But again, another great original design.
Yeah, that's a beautiful design as well. There's lots of drawings exist of these vehicles, and you see them drawn at different angles. Um, so yeah, the cannon obviously, it can tilt it forward or upward, and it's got that gunner station then as well. So it's in fact, the concept behind these vehicles was that you could accessorize the vehicles. So you got a base. This is kind of like what we were talking about with the troop transporter. You could
Mhm.
get the base vehicle, and then you could buy, say, the rocket pack, the fuel cans, other kind of
Yeah,
bolt
yeah.
on. A little bit like what Gridiron Studios are doing for some of the classified vehicles, the way you can pimp them up.
Yes,
That's
yes.
exactly what was intended with this Wolf Pack series of vehicles.
Oh man, that's an exciting concept. And again, I'll throw it out there. All of these, small independent toy companies, take a look at this stuff. Get some, I don't know what licensing would be involved or whatever, but my gosh, there it looks like there's just a wealth of inspiration to be taken from these designs. Well, I this has been an awesome conversation. I love talking about uh what to me is still new stuff, that's discovering these parallels between Action Force and GI Joe, but also the possibilities of Action Force and where it could have gone. To wrap up, obviously, my Palitoy Story, the new edition, is the big thing. But you mentioned the Star Wars book. You mentioned Total Action Force Volume 3. Just before we go, give us the rundown of these projects and where we can go to support them or follow along.
Well, if you're well, totaltoybooks.com is the best place to go. You can uh, we got our online shop is there, so you can order the Battle Action Force Treasury editions can be ordered for anyone who lives, say, on the on my side of the Atlantic. You can order from totaltoybooks.com. If you're on the American or in North America, order from skeletron.com because you will save a fortune on shipping. And then for the Star Wars book, that's only available from totaltoybooks.com. We have, I showed off the slipcase there a little bit earlier. I'm not going to try and assemble this all now while we're
Yeah,
live.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But the slipcase, we only have about 20 of those left. So that was a special edition. It was a Kickstarter exclusive. We had a minimum order quantity that we had to produce. So now that the Kickstarter rewards have been fulfilled, we've got a small number of those left. But
Okay.
people, if they just want the book, we have plenty of books. So there's no urgency on the book, but totaltoybooks.com is where you would get the book. In terms of My Palitoy Story, the second edition, that's going to come to Kickstarter late February. There is a holder page up there right now. So if you do a search on kickstarter.com for My Palitoy Story, you'll find that project. It hasn't launched just yet, but you'll be able to follow along and you'll be notified when it does go live towards the end of February. And then for Total Action Force Volume 3, again, do a search on Kickstarter for that. You'll be able to late pledge. That was successfully funded late last year, and that's going to be coming out a little bit later on this year. So if you get your late pledge in now, it's effectively a pre-order, and you can expect to have your books in hand at some time in the summer.
That's awesome. Brian, thank you so much. One, for being a wealth of information, but two, for keeping these franchises alive, for keeping the information out there, for getting new people involved in these things. There's just such opportunity here to just enrich. If you're a toy fan, any kind of toy history like this is entertaining and informational and just fun to discover and be a part of.
Oh, Dave, thank you. It's great to have the opportunity to. These are my passions. So when I get to talk about these histories, these great brands, great companies, and on both sides of the Atlantic, like there's a real shared history and heritage behind a lot of these toys. It's great to be able to chat with people like yourself and just going to share that passion.
Well, and in this day and age, any commonality that we can find that brings us together and gives us something to share and talk about is a good thing.
For sure.
Thank you so much, man. We'll be talking again soon.
Thank you, Dave. All the best.
Smash that like button if you like Needless Things.